Rotarians, yes, our speaker today is Kate Murphy, but I have asked her father to make the introduction because he's kind of proud of that young lady, so we're going to let him do that. Take the ball.
Good afternoon, fellow Rotarians. My pleasure today to introduce our speaker is my daughter Kate. Kate is a graduate of Hicksville High School. She graduated in 2016. She was one of 4 co-valedictorians. She received a scholarship, presidential scholarship from Defiance College, a Rotary scholarship, and a Community Memorial Hospital scholarship. So she's going to be able to graduate hopefully this coming spring debt-free, which was a big plus for her mom and I. She's in the 1-2-1 nursing program at Defiance College, which meant she spent her first year at DC, and then her second and third years were spent at the nursing school at Northwest State. And she finished up there and received her associate's degree, which everybody knows as being a registered nurse. She got her RIIN degree at the end of her third year, and then was looking for a summer job. And I remember we were having dinner with her grandparents when she and her mom announced that she got a summer job, but she's not going to be a waitress at Applebee's or making sandwiches at Subway. No, she is on her way to Alaska. She applied for an internship with the Rural Immersion Institute of the North, which is a program that grabs students from all over the country in the lower 48 that are interested in medical, whether it be nursing, doctor, physical therapy, whatever, and brings them up to Alaska and sends them out to some of the more remote rural areas to not only help out their healthcare needs in those communities, but to give the kids an opportunity to experience something different and maybe even recruit a few of them to come to Alaska when they're finished with their studies. So we spent the next few months getting ready. Kate never expected a trip to Alaska to be a tropical vacation, but it turned out it was. And I'm not going to steal any more of her thunder, so I'm going to turn it over to my daughter Kate to tell you about her trip to Alaska this summer.
So as most of you know at this point, I am Kate Murphy. This is not my first time presenting to Rotary, but it's been a couple of years. So first, I'd like to thank Rotary for their kind support of my education. I couldn't have done it without the scholarships that Rotary so very kindly gave me. And I'm very excited to be now back in the community and able to give back. I just got my first nursing job. I'm over at the Community Memorial Hospital now. So let me talk a little bit about my summer. You've got this lovely little graphic up here that says a lot about what I did. I volunteered, I got to help out, I got to practice nursing as a new RN, and I got to do it all in Alaska. And it was quite the journey. Alaska is beautiful, it's also huge and 4,000 miles away. So the drive up there was pretty exciting. And yes, this is the route that my grandparents and I took to drive to Alaska, because we did drive all 4,500 miles. We left on the 30th of June from our house, my house on the Defiance-Paulding County line, drove all the way across the country through Nebraska, up to Montana, through Yellowstone National Park, up into Canada, across the Alaskan Highway in British Columbia, and into Alaska, up by Denali. So we got to see Mount McKinley too. And then we started working our way south to where I spent my time in my volunteer hours. And we saw some pretty interesting things along the way. We got to do a lot of the Western migration things. I have a double major. I'm getting a degree in nursing and a degree in history this spring. And so it was very exciting for me. I got to follow the route that a lot of the pioneers took when they were crossing this country to settle in Oregon, and let me pull that down a little, to settle in Oregon and California. So this is Chimney Rock, which was considered to be the end of the prairie and the beginning of the Badlands for people who were crossing the continent. And there's my grandfather, Lonnie Williams, who has spent the last 70 years of his life making fun of his baby sister, who is terrified of snakes. So he made me get a picture of him with the rattlesnake sign just to scare my Aunt Denise. This is Yellowstone. It was absolutely beautiful the day we passed through. 90 degrees and sunny, as most of my trip was. Absolutely gorgeous. You can't make these kind of pictures up. I didn't have to retouch them at all. It really was, it looked like that. It was so busy, but it was absolutely worth it to get to see what we saw. Then we crossed into Canada, went through first Alberta, and including the big cities of Edmonton and Calgary, past a lot of their dinosaur alley, because Canada is known for its paleontology, things like that. This is the Philip J. Curie Museum. All of the fossils that you see there were found within 20 miles of where the museum building actually is. Then the Alaska Highway, the world famous, the Alcan went in World War II. It's now been paved, it didn't used to be paved. And we drove all 1,523 miles of it from where it starts in Dawson City, British Columbia, to where it ends in Fairbanks. This is the Kaskaskinhaw Curved Bridge over the Peace River, and the Peace River Bridge. They are the two largest river bridges on the Alaska Highway. I am not a bridge person. Bridges kind of scare me. My grandmother made sure that I took a picture of every bridge we crossed, just to say that I did it. That curved bridge, by the way, curves at, I believe, it's a third of a circle, basically, to get across that river. So many bears. So, driving across British Columbia, you would not think would be the place where you would see wildlife. I saw more wildlife driving through British Columbia than I did actually in Alaska. These are bears that I just saw next to the road, who very nicely stood still and let me get pictures of them from the truck. We also saw bison and moose and what are called rock sheep, which are those little goats up in the right corner. There were no actual Canadian geese in Canada. I was asked to put a picture in because no one believes me when I say there were no Canadian geese. And then Toad River is one of a number of lodges along the road. Their big thing is they have a lot of toads, so I got a picture of my grandparents as toads. This is Watson Lake. It's one of the major stops along the Alcan Highway, historic mile 635, although it's in Canada, so it's actually all in metric now, so the signpost is just there. But because they don't use the signpost anymore, what they do is they ask everyone who visits to bring a sign of their own. And so you bring a sign and leave it in Watson Lake at the signpost for us for the next travelers to know they've made it that far. This is sort of a wildlife count from one day. In one day we saw 31 bison, 18 bears, 14 sheep, 5 porcupines, 2 deer, a moose, a caribou, and a beaver. And all of those pictures I was lucky enough to be able to take. We crossed through a couple of Tlingit reserves. The Tlingit Nation lives across northern Canada and southern Alaska. So actually once I got to Alaska, I was still working within the Tlingit Nation, just in a different reservation as opposed to a Canadian reserve. They're known for their totem poles, and they are all over. Toby is the first town you stop in when you get into Alaska by way of the Alaska Highway. It's very much a little town that's built around tourism. It has some beautiful flowers though. It was summer, the sun shone 23 hours a day, it rained regularly, so all the flowers were beautiful. And they have, at that visitor center, that long building, a nice little line drawn on one of the posts that lets you know that that's where the sun stops coming up during winter. So it's right there, right above the horizon. There were wildfires throughout Alaska while I was there. There were 29 wildfires in the 3 weeks I spent up in Alaska itself. I didn't run into any of them directly, and none of them were anywhere near towns or communities, so the state sort of lets them burn for the good of the ecology. They do, however, sometimes stop traffic when they cross the road. That picture of those 3 cars waiting in line, we had been sitting there for about half an hour waiting for the guide car to come back so we could keep going. This is Fairbanks, one of the northern communities that I passed through on my way down to Anchorage and ultimately to where I spent my time at a health department in Ketchikan. It's a beautiful little city, a couple of great museums. They have the world's northernmost Denny's, which my grandfather informed me I had to get a picture of. They also have the Morris Thompson Cultural Center, which is a very large public museum supported by the Morris Thompson Trust and his family about indigenous culture in Alaska. So if you wanted a place where you could go and see all of this beautiful traditional artwork that is still being made today, it's a great place to stop. This is Denali. I found out Denali means the great one, the big one. So if you ever wonder why people are talking about Denali, you just know they're pointing at it and saying, it's that one, it's the big one. None of these pictures are mine. I did not see Denali when I was at Denali or even really when I was in Alaska. 1 in 3 chance most days of seeing Denali, it's not cloudy. I went during forest fire season, and it was always cloudy. This is Talkeetna. It's considered to be the last roadhouse town in Alaska. It's a beautiful little tourist town. You could find anything you wanted there. They had some very cute dogs. I had been away from home for 4 weeks at this point and very much missed my dog. And so I got to meet some surrogate pups, Lucy the sled dog, and Bear, who is a people dog, and was very happy to be there. They also had really good curry pasties. I love food. I very much enjoy food. It's something that I pay attention to when I travel, so I will go quickly through the food slides because there are a lot of them. But if you find yourself at the Roadhouse in Talkeetna, try the curry pasties. They're delicious. This is a muskoxen farm in Palmer who drove through. My grandpa was so excited we got to tour a farm, an old farmer. This was the high point of his trip with the muskoxen, which we found out are basically very large goats with very soft hair. Fibers I like to knit. Their yarn there goes for $195 for 8 ounces. I didn't invest, but it was nice to meet the muskox. This is the Matsu Valley. It's just a valley between northern and southern Alaska, and it's just very pretty. Anchorage itself. Anchorage was where my actual volunteer hours started. Anchorage, we drove in, stopped at the visitor center. My grandparents took their Where in the World is the Crescent News photo there. We went to the Alaska Aviation Museum. And you know, people in Alaska say sometimes that air travel in Alaska is just different. And I found myself as an Ohioan kind of taking a deep breath and thinking, I'm from the birthplace of flight, but okay, let's listen. And I found out that in Alaska, basically 90% of Alaska is only accessible by air travel. The only way to get there is to fly. So where Ohio has a huge history of military and nonprofit aviation, Alaska has a huge commercial aviation history. And so I got to see a lot of it there at their aviation museum. It was 90 degrees when I was in Alaska, almost the entire time I was in Alaska. It was warmer there than here, my parents told me. These moose invited themselves into the woman running our RIIN program's backyard, into her family pool, because it was hot out. And they proceeded to stay there for a couple days. And she sent us pictures the whole time. This is Seward. Once I actually started RIIN, what we did was we met in Anchorage, we went down to Seward, and then we went to our actual locations. So I went from Anchorage to Seward to Anchorage, and then down to Ketchikan. Seward was the first time I had ever seen the Pacific Ocean, and as you can see, I was pretty taken by it. This is Seward's library. It was also a community museum. It's the prettiest library I've ever seen, so well maintained. And they have the Sea Life Museum, or Sea Life Center there, which is a place where they do rehab for indigenous sea creatures who have been hurt in boating accidents or something of the sort. I got some pictures there too, as you can see. And here's the museum. The museum has so much indigenous history, especially in a town like Seward that doesn't have a huge indigenous population, so I was very pleasantly surprised. We went on a glacier cruise. I'm not a cruise person. I was sick the whole time. But we did get to see the glacier, and we saw some whales, and it was beautiful. Just not for me. Driving back, though, from Seward to Anchorage, because you can drive from Seward to Anchorage, we did get to see belugas. Everyone else I was traveling with, there were 20 of us, there were 10 in one car, and I was the only one awake, and I got to see them, and it was quite the money shot. And then I went to Ketchikan, and Ketchikan is an island town in southern Alaska. It's actually about a 90-minute flight across directly from Seattle. And what Ketchikan is known for is cruise tourism and salmon. And both of those were in a very precarious situation when I was there. So this is downtown Ketchikan. As you can see, it is pretty touristy. They have a lot of lovely food, a lot of art, and this river is commonly known as the Salmon Creek. If you can see in that picture, there are no salmon in it. And that was something people were paying a lot of attention to. Specifically, the major problem in Ketchikan was Ketchikan is considered the salmon capital of the world, and there were no salmon. For the entire month of July, there were no salmon. I went to restaurants there that were known for serving seafood, and they just had that part of the menu crossed out. Locals would talk about the fact there were no salmon the way that people in the movie Jaws would talk about the fact that there was a shark. Very quietly and while watching the tourists, but with a great deal of concern. And it's an ongoing problem. Salmon in Ketchikan have been fewer and fewer and harder to find for several years now. So the Alaska Department of Wildlife, Fish and Game is working hard to figure out how they can correct that. This is Totem Park. As I said, I was in another Tlingit town, so there were still a lot of totem poles in Ketchikan. And the museum was full of traditional art and traditional, not even traditional, people who worked to get Indigenous Alaskans equal rights, because when Alaska became a territory, it didn't want to provide the right to vote or the right to go to public schools to its Indigenous citizens. There were other things too. Dolly's house was a red light district house that is now a museum and is very proud of itself. And this is where I stayed in contrast to that. 2 blocks away from that red light district house, you have First United Methodist Church Ketchikan, which runs a hostel out of the top floor, and it was my home for the 2 weeks I was in Ketchikan. It was this beautiful little church, very well lit, very opening and welcoming. They let me go to church there on Sundays. I lived up on the top floor in what's their Sunday school rooms during fall, but during the summer they have it open as a hostel for travelers. As I said, there's a number of restaurants, but this is where I was spending most of my time when I was in Ketchikan at the Public Health Center. The Public Health Center is supported by the Alaska Department of Public Health and the Alaska AHEC, which is the Area Health Education Center that set me up there. While I was there, I was working in women's health, in children's health, working on getting people set up with women, infants, and children, because Alaska has such wide gaps in wealth that many people needed it in order to survive, especially new mothers. Working with patients who had mental health issues, who were interested in any kind of health care. Alaska has huge STI rates right now. You don't think about it in Ohio. We haven't had an outbreak of syphilis in almost 100 years. In Alaska right now, syphilis is endemic. They don't know the rate at which people are contracting syphilis because no one's getting tested. All they know is that people come in with late-stage syphilis to ERs, and they want to get ahead of that. So when I was there at Public Health, I spent a lot of time doing education, community outreach. We did condom programs, condoms to places where a lot of tourists would be, because Ketchikan is 12,000 people normally. When tourists come in, their population rises to over 1 million. So they tried to get ahead of that so that you wouldn't have a lot of anonymous people doing risky things and spreading potential illnesses to the community. I went on a couple of condom runs. I got very familiar with the Arctic bar. They went through a lot of the condoms I took them. And I also spent a lot of time doing health education. Their elementary school didn't have a health education program, so I got to help put together a curriculum that could address things like, what is puberty? How do I take care of myself? What kind of hygiene do I need when I start going through puberty? Things that their school suddenly has a lot of elementary school and junior high kids, and they didn't know how to talk about that. So as a nurse, I spent time practicing how to do that. Also got to go on a public health windshield assessment or drive-through, which, let me check my time as people stand up, okay, was a way of driving through the town and seeing what you saw. In this case, I saw that Ketchikan had a huge wealth disparity. You had beautiful houses on the hills that are worth millions of dollars, and then you have apartments where people are living 6 to a room on bare mattresses. You had these beautiful bald eagles in Ketchikan that follow the tourists around and eat garbage because it's easier for them to get food that way than to hunt like bald eagles here do. So you can see a lot of the health issues in Ketchikan are related to the fact that they have populations that change very rapidly. And a public health issue anywhere, lice. What I was told was you're never a real nurse until you've done your first lice check, and I did 3 of them. Kids everywhere get lice, and you still check them the same way no matter where you are. So I spent a lot of time with a comb looking at kids' hair. And sometimes people go to public health when they don't know where else to go. I had a patient come in who had abdominal pain, and she wasn't comfortable going to ER, so we worked on not so much triaging her as talking about ways for her to get health care safely. And last but not least, I got to work with a nurse practitioner who went to Frontier Nursing University, which I was very excited about because that's my long-term goal. I would like to become a midwife and a nurse practitioner, and Frontier is the school I'd like to do it at. So it was wonderful to hear that Frontier students are available all around the country, helping people in rural areas. So I finished up there in Ketchikan, and I'm not going to make you talk about my food. And then I went back to Anchorage before driving home. And in Anchorage, I had one of the most interesting experiences in a while. I went to the Alaska Native Lutheran Church in Anchorage when they were doing their Christmas in July bazaar, and they had such beautiful art. I went expecting to buy that little Christmas ornament of the polar bear up at the top, And I did, and I met the artist who made it, and it was a wonderful experience. And they also had a silent auction. And out of curiosity, more than anything else, I put a bid in on those slippers you see there. And so I accidentally bought a piece of traditional indigenous artwork that happened to be the last slippers the artist who made them ever made. And I brought them home, and they now live in my closet under glass, so that my dog, who is not excited about the way that sealskin smells, does not get it in his head that he needs to make those slippers smell like something other than sealskin. And then I drove back home with my grandparents across Canada. We crossed over in Wisconsin instead of in Montana, driving back, so it was only 6 days instead of 10. It was still a beautiful drive, and I had some really great experiences along the way. So that was my trip to Alaska. Any questions or I can answer for you, or further information I can provide? Yes?
So most of your patients were native Alaskans?
About half of my patients were indigenous Alaskans. The other half were people who had recently moved into Ketchikan who hadn't set up healthcare with the actual hospital there yet. Ketchikan is lucky it has a hospital. However, most towns in Alaska don't. In fact, most are almost 500 miles away from a hospital. And Alaska has it in their constitution that every person who lives in Alaska has a right to healthcare. So the public health departments work hard to meet that need and fill that gap between people who live in Alaska and the nearest hospital. Anything else? Yes?
Is there anything that you could pick out that you say was your biggest surprise? From what you expected? Or?
Sort of the biggest surprise for me was sort of the most uplifting. What people said when I got there was Alaska's just different. You won't feel at home, and that's okay. Alaska's just different. And I didn't feel that way at all. When I was there in Ketchikan and Anchorage was big because it's bigger than Chicago. It was a very big town for me. But Ketchikan, when I was there, felt like being in Northwest Ohio in a lot of ways. It wasn't uncomfortable. I didn't feel like an outsider. I had the opportunity to work with people who were different from me, but they welcomed me into town and they let me work with them. And that was sort of a pleasant surprise, that I didn't go and feel like I was working with people who didn't want me to be there. I felt very welcome the whole time I was there. Yes. Oh, go ahead.
What did you think of the extra daylight?
You know, I packed ahead. I planned accordingly, knowing I was going in July, so I had an eye mask so I could sleep. But on the days when I didn't have to go to bed to get up at 5 to get to the clinic on time, I really appreciated watching the fact that the sun just didn't set over the Pacific. It was beautiful.
Were you up there during the prime tourist season?
Yeah. Yeah, I was there. While I was there, Ketchikan had 5 mega cruise ships in port every day I was there. So a town of 12,000 had almost 1 million people counting tourists for the weeks that I was there. It was crazy.
How long did it take you to drive? That was interesting.
Yep. The drive up, because we went all the way up to Denali, was 10 days, and the drive back, because we all missed home at that point, was only 6.
You see the oil,
Yep, the Alaska pipeline runs parallel to a lot of the Alcan Highway, and it also cuts across a couple of bays in Seward and in Seward. It cuts across the 2 bays in Seward, so I got to see the pipeline, which was, just sheer size really does surprise you. All right, if there is nothing else, it's been an honor to present with you, and I am happy to get you out before 1 o'clock.